Today we'll shred and review the Amped Freestyle Snowboarding series, a not too talked about hidden gem trilogy comparable to the earlier Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games. I can still remember playing the original Amped the year it launched, and I'm still nearly as impressed with the game overall as I was back then. Amped Freestyle Snowboarding is near perfection. A couple minor flaws I'll discuss in a minute, but overall the gameplay is solid and the interfaces and equipment menus are the best in the series. Amped 2 has everything you'd come to expect from the original, with the addition of snow skating, manuals, and some new tricks. Although I find Amped 2 lacks in a couple key departments where the original Amped shined, Amped 3 reminds me of a specific Tony Hawk game, but not in a good way, and I felt like the narrative and cutscenes were trying way too hard to be funny. That was a quick pre-review. Now let's review each game individually, then rank the series at the end of the video. Amped Freestyle Snowboarding was developed by Salt Lake Games Studio and published by Microsoft Game Studios on November 20th, 2001 for the original Xbox. Prior to Amped, developers dabbled in the snow and skate genre and created some notable titles such as the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series, Cool Boarders, and SSX to name a few. It wasn't until Amped was released exclusively on the original Xbox in 2001 that I felt like a developer had finally done for the snowboarding scene what Tony Hawk's Pro Skater did for skateboarding. Off the bat, you're greeted with an intro video and then presented with some very well done GUI. Create your character, choose a board, and select your mountain. The game's soundtrack is one of the best pop-punk soundtracks in video games, with over 150 tracks, and it was the platform that helped launch the career of the band Yellowcard. The control scheme makes sense after you spend some time with it, and the level design for the most part is awesome. As you can see, it took me a while to even be able to control my character properly and put a couple tricks together again. After some practice, I was knocking goals out left and right. The levels are pretty straightforward goals-wise. They tend to offer goals for high scores, media scores, and hidden snowmen for most levels, followed by sponsor and pro scenario unlocks. With each goal completed, you'll either gain new equipment, sponsors, stat points, or levels. There's something about the equipment and gear screens that present the items so well, comparable to purchasing items on Tiger Woods' PGA Tour Golf 2005. Along with gaining items, you will also increase your world rank while completing goals and levels. Now for the gameplay. I'd say the gameplay is more sim-like than arcade, but it may lie somewhere in the middle. Certainly has its inspiration from games like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 or 4 in terms of interface layout, level design, and goals, but also manages to remain unique. Hold A to increase momentum and prepare for a jump. Let go at the top of the jump for the best release. Left stick for flips and spins, and right stick for grabs along with A, X, and Y. Left and right trigger to tweak and B to grind. That's about it considering there weren't any manuals in the first game. The only two things that fell a little short for me in Amped were collision detection on certain items, has you stuck for far too long or in a weird way sometimes. Also, carving wasn't introduced until the third title, so turning right or left and stopping are a little tough at times. Finally, Amped has good graphics, gameplay, soundtrack, and GUI, and is definitely one of the better snowboarding games out still. If you're a snowboarding fan and somehow missed this one, I'd highly recommend it. I'd give Amped Freestyle Snowboarding a solid 9 out of 10. Amped 2 was developed by Salt Lake Games Studio and published by Microsoft Game Studio on October 28, 2003 for the original Xbox. Everything about the original Amped is mostly here, and you'll be introduced to even more pros, new levels, new tricks including manuals, and a new snow skate feature. Snow skate is like having a skateboard in the snow, and you can perform tricks similar to skateboarding. Snow skate can be incorporated into regular runs along with exclusive snow skate runs. Additionally, events have been added where you can compete against other racers in order to earn fame and skill points. Goals and gameplay are very similar, such as impressing the sponsor by doing the tricks they like during a sponsor challenge, or defeating a pro challenge by getting enough combo points in the spots they call out. Aside from Snowskate, the biggest gameplay difference in Amped 2 is being able to manual. Manuals will allow you to combo your jumps and rails together, and once you get a few hours in, you'll be putting combos together without even thinking about it. Amped 2 didn't do anything totally different than the first title, and the physics, gameplay, and graphics are nearly identical. This is minor, but the only thing I found the original Amped did better than the second was the overall presentation of the game, and especially the GUI art style and details. Still a slight issue with some collision and no carving, but nothing game-breaking. Amped 2 would be more comparable to something like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. Sure, it's still a great game in the Tony Hawk series, but it doesn't necessarily surpass Tony Hawk 2 in any department. That being said, if you're looking for music, they doubled the amount of tracks to 300 in Amped 2, and I'd argue that the setlist may be slightly better. Lastly, I'd give Amped 2 an 8.5 out of 10 overall, and if you were a fan of the first one and didn't give the second a try, you know what to do. Amped 3 was developed by IndieBuilt and published by 2K on November 22nd, 2005 for the Xbox 360. With Amped 3, the team at IndieBuilt took a fairly different approach to the overall presentation and gameplay. Right away, you're hit with a lengthy cutscene explaining the story. The first thing I thought of was Tony Hawk's American Wasteland. Amped 3 seemed heavily inspired by American Wasteland's graphic style, story, and gameplay. But where American Wasteland did a pretty good job at providing an interesting and humorous story that made sense with the environment, Amped 3 fell short, and I didn't really find much of the story or cutscenes to be neither funny nor necessary to enhance the gameplay at all. I'm not sure if sticking to the same formula, just more polished, would have been the way to go, but this wasn't exactly doing it for me. Don't get me wrong, Amped 3 introduced a bunch of new stuff, from a huge selection of new equipment, costumes, boards, and levels, to new rides such as a sled or snowmobile. I had a decent amount of fun with the sled, just placing myself in front of ramps and seeing what kind of damage I could do to my character. And I found the snowmobile to be a good way to get around both up and downhill, and you can perform tricks mid-air if you want to try something a little different. Fast travel is a nice feature, and the soundtrack is still pretty awesome overall, with over 300 songs, comparable to Amped 2. Gameplay. The controls in Amped 3 are smooth. In addition to being able to manual, you can also carve left or right with the triggers to make sharp turns, and stopping is much easier. Unlike Amped 1 and 2, Amped 3 doesn't feel like you're actually earning your score or performing your tricks half the time, in my opinion. Amped 3 doesn't use the stick to grab, rather face buttons only, and rails don't require the B button, they're done automatically when close enough to a rail. I also don't feel like you have to prepare for a landing with as much caution as the original two titles, and I seemed to land most tricks with ease. Maybe the default view has something to do with it, but I also didn't care for the camera angle while in the air for most tricks in general. Not the worst changes, but I just didn't feel like I was playing the same series and felt more like I was playing an SSX game. Fun gimmick mechanics like driving a snowmobile or riding a sled, and cool new costume features make Amped 3 a good game overall. If you're fresh to the series, I'd suggest starting with the original Amped, but if you want something a little easier to pick up and play, maybe give Amped 3 a try. Overall, I'd give Amped 3 a 7 out of 10. I've always been a huge fan of snow and skateboarding games, and the Amped series is no exception. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Amped games in the comments below, and let me know which one is your favorite. Overall, we can give the Amped series a combined total of 24.5 out of 30. If you haven't tried the Amped series, please do. As always, thanks for watching and stay tuned for a new video.